So, big pleasure today to have Panayotis Mertikopoulos visiting us and teaching at the PhD program and giving a seminar. So Panayotis, I have the big pleasure that Panayotis was my postdoc, so I'm very proud of it. He was my first postdoc, and now he's one of the most brilliant people doing evolutionary game theory optimization, online optimization. And his talk today is specifically about his recent work on optimization, and in particular stochastic gradient descent method and its mathematical properties. The floor is for you, dear friend.
Then thank you very much for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here, thank you very much for the kind words, most of which were undeserved. This is actually not a very recent project because this is. Oh yeah, I should say that this won't have too much to do with game theory. The reason is that last time I was here, you know, the talk I gave was basically an evolved version of what I was already presenting in the course. So out of deference and respect to my poor students that are hearing the same things over and over again, I thought I'd try something different. Now, this is not really a recent project. It is something that I am very much interested in. It is the behavior of stochastic gradient descent, which is the standard algorithm that we have for solving stochastic optimization problems, and now is very popular in deep learning applications and all that. And this is something that started at least 5 or 6, actually 6 or 7 years ago with some colleagues over at EPFL, Nadav Halak, Ali Kavis and Volkan Javer, and I will present a few results from that first paper over there. But mostly today I want to talk about the work of Wais Azizian, who is my PhD student at Grenoble, and is this character over here, and who is responsible basically for all the hard math that you will see today, and this is also a project that has been going on for at least 3 years now, 2 to 3 years now. All right, now it is going to be about stochastic gradient descent. Now, if you are coming from an optimization background, I don't need to say much about this. If you are not, and you're still you're wondering what this is all about, then whenever you want to solve a very difficult or a very large, high-dimensional problem like what you have in classification tasks, in machine learning, etc., or in deep learning in this case. Well, usually SGD, stochastic gradient descent, is the method that you use. So let me explain a bit the picture that you see here. This picture is the loss landscape, the function that we are trying to optimize when we are trying to determine the weights that go in a deep neural network. So you have your deep network architecture that you want to train in order to perform a certain task. In order to do that, you have to basically find the minimum of a very, very, very complicated and very high-dimensional function like this one over here. And these functions are actually extremely complicated in terms of optimization. So you have to imagine these were actually, if you want to play around or are looking for a nice screensaver for your computer, I highly suggest this site, losslandscape.com, because what they do is they provide visualizations of the loss landscapes of very high-dimensional neural networks. Now, these neural networks have their dimensionality ranges in the several hundred billions. And here I'm only plotting 2 dimensions. What I'm plotting here is something which has been done, visually with a principal component analysis, trying to identify the most impactful coordinates for the loss landscape. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is that in the non-convex landscapes that we are facing nowadays can be extremely complicated. Not only do you have this very, very textured pattern of very, 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 very many local minimizers that are very close to each other, you see that you have these very, very sharp peaks and also these very deep ravines, and navigating this in order to get a global minimum is very, very, very difficult. Okay, so what we're trying to understand with VAES is that you have a loss landscape like this one, or a zoomed in version like that one, and you're running basically an optimizer like stochastic gradient descent. Okay, so this is traversing the landscape, and it is going to be trapped in this, or maybe it will fall inside and find a global minimum. What we're trying to understand is precisely which optimizers, which minimizers, which local minima would tend to be selected. What is the probability of reaching a certain minimum, and what is the global time that we might need in order to get to such to a global minimum? Okay, so this is what the talk is going to be about. Not game theory. It is going to be about solving non-convex stochastic minimization problems of this form. We have a function which is expressed as an expectation of some random function, and the way that we can access this function. We do not have any white box knowledge. We do not know this function. If you want, the only thing that we can do is at any given point we can compute a gradient, and in fact not the full gradient. We can only compute maybe a stochastic gradient thereof. So why a stochastic gradient? This depends on the type of application that you have in mind. In many cases, especially in control theoretic applications, gradients, when this has to do with an interaction with the physical system, they are naturally noisy. So all your gradient computation have noise. In a deep learning context, when we're talking about deep nets, when we're talking about ML models, the thing is that you have your function here is actually of a finite sum form, and it has a huge number of summands, and computing the gradient of this would mean running a backpropagation algorithm or a heavy algorithm anyway on each of these, and then n times. So computing a gradient would take forever. No one does that. No one can do that, at least not consistently. So instead, you only take a small batch of these. You do your mini batch sampling, and you end up with a stochastic approximation of your gradient. And anyway, for me, I want to be quite agnostic. I don't want to focus on a particular model. So for me, this is just an oracle. This is a stochastic gradient oracle, a stochastic first order oracle. And what we're going to care about in all the talk is SGD, this very simple algorithm. Okay, so you compute, you are at a given point, you get some oracle feedback on the gradient of your function, you take a step along this direction modulated by your step size, and this is your new point, and you repeat over and over again. All right, simplest possible algorithm that you can imagine. All right, so what is it that we know about this algorithm? Now, of course, when I say what is it that we know, and I give you a slide like with 3 bullet points, you can assume that I am basically ignoring a huge literature on this on this method. I don't know if the number of papers on SGD are measured in the tens of thousands or in the hundreds of thousands. Anyway, I don't know. But basic things to keep in mind is that if we have if we have some sort of convexity, like strong convexity or simple convexity, then we have good global convergence guarantees that tell us that in terms of converging to the optimum, to the global optimum of the function, we can do it in 1/t or 1/t time, depending on whether the function is strongly convex or simply convex. All right. Now, in the non-convex case, when we have nothing to go on, the only guarantees that we have without assuming some further structure in terms of convergence rates is that if we run stochastic gradient descent and we use a technique which is known as random stopping, then we can output a point which is epsilon close to criticality. It has an epsilon small gradient norm after 1/e to the 1/epsilon to the 4th iterations, which is what I mean here by 1/t to the 1/4 convergence rate in terms of gradient norm. All right, but this is just a criticality guarantee. It doesn't answer any sort of deeper question of whether we have some sort of convergence of the trajectories of gradient descent, because whenever you, in practice, no one is actually using a stopping trick or averaging. They just run the algorithm and they harvest the last iterate. So whether these last iterates, whether we have sequential convergence in the long run or not, is quite open, and this is a question that I want to address. And this type of guarantees tell us nothing on whether we actually avoid non-critical or non-minimizing regions of the state space. And also it answers nothing about, first of all, which points, which minimizers are more likely to be observed in the long run, how more probable they are, etc., and also whether we can hope to get to the vicinity of a global minimum of f, and how long this will take. Sorry? Okay. All right. So basically, these are the questions that I want to address here during the talk. Yeah, tell me.
Can you explain what you mean by does HGD avoid non-critical points?
I will.
It converges to a critical point.
So,
it doesn't converge.
First of all, what I want to say here is whether it spends too much time away from criticality, whether it spends a sizable and non-negligible amount of time away from criticality or not. Okay. And then, if it doesn't, assuming that it doesn't, if it spends a non-negligible amount of time away from minimizing sets or not. All right. Sorry, any more questions? Okay. So, I'm going to put here some technical assumptions. I'm going to show them once. They are not the tightest possible assumptions that we can use. I'm going to show them and then I'm going to forget about them because I don't care so much about the various tweaks that you can do, but I want to give at least the main feel of what type of assumptions we need. We need some smoothness for the function. This is standard in optimization to assume Lipschitz smoothness. We need some coercivity, so we need the function to grow to infinity at infinity, because otherwise SGD can simply go away to infinity, and this is not the case that we're interested in. And we need some minimal regularity for the critical sets, for the critical set of the function. Okay, so here what I want, the minimal requirement that I want is that the critical set of f is basically a union of smoothly connected components. Okay, so you may have, yes?
What is critical set?
The critical set is where the gradient vanishes.
So it's a local minimizer.
No, it could be local. It could be local maximizers, saddle points, whatever you want. Where the gradient vanishes, critical points. Okay, stationary points. All right. Any more questions? Yes.
By smoothly connected, you mean
By smoothly connected, I mean that that on any point on the component, I can find a smooth path.
smooth?
Yes. Actually, absolutely continuous suffices, but this is a discussion that I don't want to get into. Yeah. So I don't want something like a very crazy zigzag crocodile teeth like domain. Yeah.
And the Lipschitz smoothness, I guess you only need it on some domain because at infinity you don't care if it's Lipschitz.
Actually, I do.
But it's progressive, so you are not guaranteed for the function to be Lipschitz at all.
Just two things. What we do care, this Lipschitz smoothness is not only a smoothness condition, but it is also a growth condition. Okay, so if I have a function which grows like exponentially fast, then this means that I can have exponentially large gradients, and then these are very difficult to control. Actually, you are right, however, that we don't really need, thanks to coercivity and some extra control that we have, we do not really need this global Lipschitz smoothness assumption. We can relax it, but I'm keeping it to simplify things. So, yeah.
Can you talk a bit more about the third one? For me, it's like the most critical assumption.
It is not. It is
Because I mean,
for instance.
Minimum, it's not satisfying.
Sorry.
If you have two local minima.
Of course it is. Of course it is. Every component of critical components has to be smoothly connected. Okay. Otherwise it would be a unimodular function. So.
When you say smooth, for example, if there's some algebraic, is it smooth?
Exactly. So if you have a no minimal, if you have a definable structure here, then this is automatic. Okay. So
That set of Nash equilibrium is union of semi-algebraic set, which is much more complex than just minimum of critical points of functions.
Yeah.
So it's not very strong assumption.
Yeah. Are there any? Yeah.
It is finite union or it's affinite union?
Okay. It is a finite union. It is a finite union. You can relax this assumption, but then things become many of the results. Even stating the results that we have is going to be a pain in the proverbial. So for the rest of this talk, finite number of components. So nothing crazy like a sine x plus x squared. Yeah.
And by smooth, how smooth? Lipschitz is enough? Or?
Absolutely continuous is actually enough.
So it's the same, right? Because of
Yeah.
So it's pass smooth.
Yes.
So it's not a big assumption.
No. This is just there because I need to be at peace with my mathematical conscience. Okay. Otherwise, I wouldn't even mention it. All right. So now, for the oracle, because we have two main components. We have the objective that we're trying to minimize, and we also have the oracle. What type of gradient, what type of stochastic gradient we have. All right, so we want unbiased stochastic gradients. All right, that's one thing. And we also want positive covariance. If we don't have positive covariance, then this means that, maybe, I'm not talking about gradient descent, I'm talking about stochastic gradient descent. So I really want some stochasticity. And that you have sufficient noise, basically. That there is no point where the noise vanishes. Okay. And I also want some growth on the noise. I don't want it. I want the tails of the noise to be relatively tame, so sub-Gaussian here for this talk, and I don't want the variance proxy of the noise to grow sublinearly, to grow superlinearly in terms of the distance from the origin. Okay, so yes. Z is a vector, right? Z is a vector. Why?
You say prof Z is positive. You
This is positive definite. Positive definite. Positive definite. This is a matrix. So I mean positive definite. All right. Yes. No. These are the good questions to ask.
And smooth is
Where are we? Ah, yes. No, I wanted smooth with respect to x, and with respect to omega, I do need it to be continuous, but okay.
You mean for each omega, or you mean some
Yeah.
uniformity?
No, no uniformity. Yeah. There is going to be, I'm saying this right now, there is going to be an extra assumption that we will need toward a bit later. But it is, I don't have the machinery to state it yet, so I'm just letting you know that I will add to this a third one. All right, anything else so far? All right, okay. So I'm gonna start with not with the main course of this talk. I'm going to start with SGD, which is run with a vanishing step size. So just to give you an idea, when SGD first came into being like 75 years ago from the works of Roberts and Monroe, all right, and for basically 50 years, the standard way to run SGD was with a vanishing step size. In fact, the Robbins-Monroe step size, as it is called, an L2 minus L1 step size. This has some nice properties, which I will talk about. But right now, this is not what is used in actual applications in most applications of SGD, because a vanishing step size really slows down the algorithm. And when you have huge landscapes to traverse, very high dimensional, you cannot afford to have a step size that vanishes very quickly. So I will start with this, but this is not the main part of the talk. All right, and I will try to show a video. We'll see if that works. Come on, work, good. So let's see. Stop. Okay. All right, here. Shut up. Okay. All right. So what I'm showing here is a standard function, a non-convex function. You see here the level sets. And the red dots are particles of SGD that I've initialized randomly over the space. All right. And the little tail is just to keep track of the trajectory. All right. Here I'm running SGD with a vanishing step size. The local minimizers of the function are these blue dots. The red dots here are saddle points, and this is the global and this is a local maximum of the function. All right. So let's see what goes on. You see that very quickly, most trajectories are attracted to a local basin, to a local minimum, and then they play around. And if I run this for a long time, then you would see that they actually eventually converge to these local minimizers. All right. So this is the basic intuition that I want you to retain for vanishing, for SGD with a vanishing step size. And this is what I'm showing here. You start with this spread over situation, then very quickly it starts coalescing towards the slower parts of the loss landscape. You will see here that certain trajectories are actually, at least momentarily, trapped near this saddle point. Okay, and in fact, in 2 dimensions, this trapping is very light, but in very high dimensions, if you have like 100 billion stable directions and only one unstable directions, you might have to wait a really long time to maybe escape this. So these are not benign points. But anyway, at least in this example, you see that after a while everything has cleared up, and basically in a while, after only 200 iterations, it basically converges to a local minimizer. All right. So this is the empirical observation. The way that you can prove this, well, there are two. There is one way that I find particularly illuminating, which is to compare SGD with the gradient flow, which is what you get when you basically introduce here the discrete time derivative of xt, and then you have what is known in the theory of stochastic approximation as an asymptotic pseudo-trajectory of the gradient flow. Now, you know that the gradient flow converges not point-wise, but at least to the set of critical points. And so you might hope that if the step size of the method is sufficiently small to wash out the noise here, then the limit of SGD and the limit of the gradient flow will coincide. All right, making this intuition precise took a lot of work. As I said, we want this because in the case of the gradient flow, we have this very nice Lyapunov function which tells us that we get convergence of the gradient flow to the set of critical points. But actually going farther and showing that you have convergence to the set of critical points is a bit trickier to obtain. The first result of this type was obtained by Bertsekas and Tsitiklis in 2000, not using actually this stochastic approximation machinery. But if you use this, you can actually also refine the result a bit and use step sizes that are considerably faster than the L2-1 step sizes that they used. So basically, in the work of Bertsekas and Tsitiklis, the step size that you could use for SGD was up to 1 over square root of t. You could not use any larger step sizes, but you can refine the analysis a bit and you can show that you can use even larger step sizes. And in that case, you can show that with probability 1, the sequence of iterates produced by SGD converges to a critical component of your function. All right. Yes?
Is it one with large dimension? Is the case with the Laplace method, for instance?
Come again?
Is it the connected component you converge to? Is it one typically with large dimensions, as is the case
You don't know.
with Laplace method?
We do not know, and we cannot say anything because this is not something that depends on the tail of probability, it is not a tail event, because maybe with some randomness that you do not control, the first iteration, the first noise that you get puts you in a small Bayesian or a large Bayesian. You have no control, you have no probabilistic control over that. And then you cannot get unstuck because you have this decreasing step size. So I don't think that you can make any connection to that, precisely because it is not a tail event. But keep that intuition because it will become important later on when we talk about constant step size. All right. All right. Yes. Unconstrained. Everything I say is unconstrained. I don't say anything on that. What you see is what you get. Nothing more, nothing less. All right. It is extremely tricky to do either projected or mirror descent policies. This is a very large. This is a very long. Yes, very much, very much. Yes.
Again, in case for useless, the critical points you may converge to, they have nothing to do with for instance, the Morse index or the signature of the HR? Or?
Next slide. Next slide. Okay, because next slide is exactly whether exactly what type of critical points we actually converge to. All right. Now, there are many different conditions. The easiest one is when you have what is known as a hyperbolic saddle point, which means that the Hessian of your objective is invertible at that point. Okay, these were the first saddle points that were considered, and these are the Morse ones. Okay, but there are many cases where you could also have zero eigenvalues and zero eigenvalues of the Laplace of the Hessian, and you want to be able to treat those as well. All right, and these are considerably harder than the hyperbolic ones. These are what is known. These are known in the literature as strict saddle points, which means that at least one eigenvalue is negative. You have at least one unstable direction. I don't know anything about the rest, and the big question is whether you can escape those. All right. So there is a result. Here is a result that tells you that if, in addition to the previous assumptions, we have this assumption over here, which is that the noise is uniformly exciting. What does this mean? That along every direction you have it is uniformly bounded away from zero. Okay, you don't have a direction where it is strictly zero. All right. Yeah, that's fine. If it is much weaker, for instance, than isotropic noise, which tells you that you have to be the same in all directions. Here, it tells you that you only need to have a positive component in every direction. That's all. If you have this, then for any step size, for any decreasing step size, a polynomially decreasing step size, you can show that the probability that xt converges to a strict saddle point or to a manifold of strict saddle points is precisely zero. All right. And I have to say that this is actually a result which builds on the shoulders of very difficult results. First by P. Mantle in the 90s, who did the case of hyperbolic saddle points at around the same time by Duflo, and also Benaim and Hirsch, who basically treated the much more difficult case when you have manifolds of saddle points. All right, a hyperbolic manifold. Now, it turns out that you can actually lift hyperbolicity, and you can only work with this condition. But yeah, the heavy work was actually done by Pimentel, Duflo, and Benaim and Hirsch. This result heavily builds on the machinery of Benaim and Hirsch. It uses their Lyapunov function, and it uses a refinement of P. Mantle's probabilistic estimates to control the deviations from that, and it just we refine the analysis here of to leverage a bit less than hyperbolicity, and instead use the fact that we have a potential function, which is actually all we need. All right. Yes.
So about the smoothness, I have a question. At some point you mentioned C2 smoothness. Z more or less is like the expectation is more or less like the gradient. So do you intend that in fact the objective function is more than something like C3 or something like this? What is your typical regularity in fact you have on it? You have C2, you have C11, you have
C here first of all for F it is C2. We don't need more than C2. All right. Here, actually, for this result, we don't need any smoothness for Z. Z is the noise. At least if I haven't screwed up the notation. Z is the noise. Here, this could just be, you could just run SGD with any martingale noise, and it is, okay? No. Z is the noise. Z is the noise. All right. Yeah. Any more questions? All right. Okay. So these this is a mix of good and bad news. Good news is we have converted. We can. It only converges SGD with the vanishing step size. Only converges to local minimizers. Okay, we cannot exclude all saddle points, but at least we can exclude strict saddle points. All right, and but the big thing is that as you asked me before, Guillaume, at least there is no known way or known technology to me with which one can show or with which one can predict which minimizers can be selected or what is the probability of reaching this or that minimizer, precisely because this is something which depends on the beginning of the process, not on its end. So 3, 5, 10, 11 steps might determine what happens for infinity afterwards. Yeah.
Question, is it not true if we put some assumptions on F,
Mm-hmm.
or minimal, whatever,
Okay.
then so the degeneracy will travel to zero?
N-
The critical point would be
No, no. That is not true, because if you have a function like x cubed, which is perfectly minimal, algebraic, whatever you want, this has a non-strict saddle point. All right. You need at least one you need at least one Morse unstable direction. If you have nothing, you can be algebraic, you can be analytic, and still have problem with degeneracies. All right.
And you spoke about in practice this difficult function deep learning.
Mm-hmm.
They satisfy
They
degeneracy?
you have a bunch. You can. I take it back. In deep learning, it depends a lot on what type of a loss function you use. For instance, if you use logistic loss or if you use square loss, and also what type of activation functions that you use. If you use ReLU, GeLU, or sigmoid or whatever. Depending on that, depending on what type of deep learning architecture you have, it may well be. You may well have You may have a lot of degeneracies that you cannot exclude from that. Yeah.
Do you know if there is any connection between this kind of assumption and like chain transitivity, in the sense of if you have a chain recurrent component?
You go to the monograph by Benaim, chapter 5.6. You have everything we want. Basically, when you have a gradient system or a gradient-like system, its ICT sets are precisely the critical. At least, okay, I should have to say, if you have a gradient system on RD, because if you are on a manifold, there are certain things that you have to be careful with. But if you're on RD and you have a gradient system, then its critical components are precisely the ICT sets. It's ICT sets. All right. And this is why this is like the application for at least one very, very nice application of Benaim's theory.
What I meant is that, okay, if you have a strict set, it is a critical point.
Mm-hmm.
But you can escape it via pseudo orbits toward
Yes.
a local minimum, but for a local minimum you can't escape it via pseudo orbits.
Okay.
So my question is, like when you have this uniformly exciting
Yeah.
function, does it mean that you will escape any ICT sets where you can't convert?
No. Again, the same thing. Same thing with Redan. If you have an extremely flat critical point, all right. Even though, yes, you do have a pseudo orbit which will connect it to some local minimizer from which you cannot escape. It does not give you enough control to temper the noise. So basically, you could be taking drift steps, but which are very, very small and which are overshadowed by the noise. If you have nothing, if you don't have sufficient control on the drift, you cannot escape. You cannot guarantee escape, at least not with this type of technology result. Yeah.
I feel like I'm missing something because
Yeah.
the theorem tells you
Mhm.
But you seem to derive the conclusion that it only converges to local minimizers. But if you can converge to non-strict saddle points that are not local minimizers, right?
Okay, so fair enough. This is a bit of a cheating formulation. I'm relying on the fact that I have this up here to keep me honest. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry? Yes, sir. All right. So constant step size. I cannot say no to Rida. He is extremely persistent. Now let's see. I said you are extremely persistent. I did not say anything about winning. All right. So here, keep the vanishing step size for SGD, and let's see what happens with constant step size SGD, and to see the differences. All right. So here, first of all, you see that the process is much faster, and you see that it is also much noisier, and you see that also it does not converge, and you also see that there are some transfer. I mean, there is. Whoops! No, I don't want that. You see that there are also these transfers of particles from one local minimizer to another. All right. So I have how much? 20 minutes, if we, or 15, maybe, because I don't know what counts. All right. Okay. So here, first of all, when we're talking about SGD with a constant step size, you forget convergence, and you can show that it with probability 1 it will not converge unless you have a very specific function. What we care about, what we will have to care about, is these clouds, how sharply it concentrates around different local minimizers, and where this probability cloud has a higher density, basically which critical points or which local minimizers end up attracting more mass of SGD, more particles. All right. Okay. So the key questions that we have is, first of all, if we have, first of all, this sort of concentration phenomenon, do we have such a stationary distribution? Whether this stationary distribution avoids or not the non-critical regions of the loss landscape, and thirdly, and perhaps most importantly, which minimizer, which critical points are more likely to be observed, and by how much? And it is these questions that I would like to try to answer in the rest of the talk. And just to give you the very informal answer to all these questions is that for the first, that yes, the critical region of F is visited exponentially more often than any other non-critical region. All right, that's the first point, thing to keep in mind. Then you have these critical components. I say here critical points, but what I mean really is components of critical points. You have these different components, and you can associate to each of these components sort of a physicist would call it an energy. So to every critical component has an associated energy, which I will describe in detail later. And what happens is that the distribution of SGD over these components follows basically what is known in statistical physics as a Boltzmann-Gibbs law with temperature equal to the method's step size. What this means is that if a critical component has energy EI, for the ith critical component, then the probability of observing SGD near it is exponential of minus EI divided by the step size. All right. And This, thanks to this result, you can actually show that non-minimizing critical points, non-minimizing components are observed exponentially less often than minimizing components without the strict saddle assumption. It is not needed. And
When you say minimizers, local minimizers?
local. And in terms of which is the most visited region of all the critical points, well, then this is the so-called ground state of the problem. It is the one which has minimal energy. But this, and this is important, is not necessarily the one with the lowest objective value. All right, so the global minimum is not necessarily the ground state of the problem. All right, so this is the very, very informal, high-level takeaway of, yeah.
How the starting points are determined?
We don't care. This, the initial condition, the initial condition is actually forgotten here. The initial condition is not forgotten when you're running SGD with a vanishing step size, but when you're running SGD with when you're running SGD with a constant step size, you have an ergodic Markov chain which can go from every point to every other. So essentially, yeah, it is constant step size. Yeah.
The ground state is defined based on the energy. Can you explain what is the energy?
I will explain later. It is a very important question, and I cannot. It takes some time to define it. All right. Any more questions? All right. Now, just to start making things a bit more precise. The way that you, when I'm saying it visits exponentially more often, etc., what I have in mind is basically the occupation measure of the process. What is this? You give me a set, a target set B, which you want to examine. Then what you do is you count how many times your process has visited this set, and you average out. All right, this is the occupation measure, and in SGD, it has the pleasant property that these measures converge vaguely to what is known as an invariant measure of the process, an invariant distribution, which tells you that, it tells you that this should be, if xt, an invariant measure, the invariant measure of the process is basically the stationary distribution. So if xt is distributed according to the invariant distribution, then xt plus 1 would be distributed. This is a typo. All right? Okay. So since basically the invariant measure captures the long run behavior of the occupation measure, what we want to focus is exactly on understanding the concentration properties of this invariant measure. All right? Yes?
Analyzing the process with fixed step size
Mm-hmm.
doesn't use continuous time and has nothing to do with
I didn't. You're asking two questions at the same time. The answer to the first question is no. The answer to the second question is yes. So, yes, it has to do with continuous time. No, it doesn't have to do with stochastic approximation. All right. So, basically, the way that we analyze the system is we are taking an ansatz, what we call the Markov chain ansatz, which is what you saw that basically the process spends a lot of time near critical points. Maybe there are transitions, but basically it spends most of the time near critical points. So we will begin with the ansatz that we have this sort of. We will study a finite state Markov chain which is spanned, which is based on the critical components of the function. All right. So if you have this function, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, this 9-state Markov chain. All right. And what we are going to try to do is to understand the distribution of SGD via the distribution and the properties, the stationary properties of this finite state Markov chain. Okay, so the hard part is to make what I'm saying, to make this approximation precise. This is very difficult. Once you have it, however, once you have mapped the problem to a finite state Markov chain, then okay, you open your Harris, you open your favorite book on Markov chains, and you start harvesting results. All right, and in particular, this is how we managed to get an expression for the invariant measure of the process via precisely this induced chain argument. All right, so the technical roadmap is actually quite intricate, and it needs three basic steps. The first is to establish what is known as a large deviation principle for basically SGD, an accelerated version of that. I don't want to get into the details. Then to show that this process actually does concentrate on this induced Markov chain, and then use the ansatz that I said before, that we use this approximation by finite time Markov chain, and we use the Markov chain tree theorem in order to estimate the process. All right, these three steps is in continuous time. If we weren't actually studying discrete time processes, but if we were studying a diffusion process, let's say, all right, a diffusive gradient flow, this would be the three-step plan of the theory of Friedlin and Wenzel, who wrote a book about the large deviation theory of diffusion processes. All right, here we do not have a diffusion process, we have a discrete time process, but you know, this is the plan that we are following. All right. Now, this part I will not discuss at all. It is extremely technical. I don't have the time to go into it. And instead, I will just give you some elements of these two things to give you an idea of what's going on. And to start by answering Rémi's question about how do you define this energy, well, first of all, the first thing that you need is to basically quantify, to describe in a precise sense the statistics of the noise that is entering the process. Okay, so what we do is we consider, the first thing that we consider is the cumulant generating function of the noise process and of the gradient oracle. Okay, if cumulant generating function CGF is confusing you, just think log of the moment generating function. So, and by the way, this you already see the connection to Laplace, basically. This log cumulant, this cumulant generating function, is in the theory of large deviations plays the role of what is known as a Hamiltonian function, and its convex conjugate relative to the second argument here, it is P, so I'm conjugating to V, all right, momentum to velocities. This is known in large deviation theory as the Lagrangian of the process. And if we were talking about establishing a large deviation principle, you know, for ordinary finite sums of IID random variables, then this would look something like that. If you have a gradient, if you are at a fixed point, okay, and you just draw IID samples from your gradient oracle at the same point, then if you want to examine the question of when am I in a given set, this is given by Cramer's theorem, which is the basis for large deviation theory, by this rate function over here, which is basically the infimum of this Lagrangian over the set that you are studying. All right, this is the standard large deviations principle that you have for sums of random variables. Here, we do not have just a random variable, i.e. random variable, we have very highly correlated random variables because gradient step goes from one step to the other, and xk and xk minus 1 are very, very strongly correlated. All right, so how do you establish a large deviation principle for this type of processes, where this is where you take, this is where you apply some magic from, well, you want to call it physics, you want to call it Feynman-Catch, you want to call it Laplace, you want to call it large deviations. You define this action functional, which is the integral of the Lagrangian, exactly as you would do in classical mechanics. And this is also the basic element of the theory of Friedel and Wenzel that I mentioned before. And what you can show is that the trajectories of SGD tend to concentrate around precisely the minimizers of this action functional over here. All right. There is a precise statement here with actually matching upper and lower bound. I'm only providing here the lower bound, but it gets quite technical to even state that, so I prefer to stay at a high level. All right. Now, once you have, yeah.
Are you here in the discrete or continuous time?
Discrete time. So.
Very
Very good. So this is a continuous curve, and this here, you will notice that I put here a big X. I did not explain what the big X is because I was trying to avoid this question. The big X here is a continuous time interpolation of the trajectory of SGD. So SGD is points. This is the continuous time interpolation which connects it, and you connect that to the to a given curve, which is going to be then the minimizer of this action functional. Yes, yes, yes. Exactly. Yeah.
From this, if I'm not mistaken, you can call continuous dynamics and a random perturbation of this dynamics. Is it a gradient flow, by the way, from which this guy is a good rate function, the integration of this?
So.
Is it a good rate function for deterministic dynamics, which is of gradient flow type, from which a certain explicit random perturbation which produce the large deviation principle with this rate function for these dynamics?
So.
I don't know if I'm clear.
I think I understand. I will try. If I don't manage, we can take this offline. If you have a randomly perturbed dynamical system, which I guess is what you asked, right? Yes. If you have a randomly perturbed dynamical system and you have, for instance, let's say a diffusion perturbation, all right, then this is exactly the result. What you are describing is exactly one of the basic results and the large deviation principle of Friedel and Wenzel, which shows that this thing here, without the step size, that this thing here, this, and what I showed before, I don't have my clicker with me, is exactly a good rate function in terms of large deviations for this. All right. Here, however, we have a discrete process. All right. So this could be because of eta. This could be all over the place. So it is different, but it plays the role of a good rate function. Only that, precisely because we are in discrete time, in order to make this statement precise, I would have to introduce a bunch of other auxiliary processes that I don't.
Is it correct to figure out that the continuous dynamic deterministic that you think of is of gradient flow type for the energy?
Yes, if that depends on the noise, however. So, for instance, if the noise is Gaussian, yes.
Okay.
All right. If the noise is not Gaussian, not necessarily. Not necessarily, because imagine you could have like areas with very, very low noise and areas with very, very high noise, so completely different variance. And because of this, this would actually introduce a variable metric for the gradient flow. It would be a very, very modified flow. It could be a very, very modified flow in that case.
But still, the direction would be.
I-
The function would be a Lyapunov function for the trajectories of the.
I don't want to say either yes or no. I understand the intuition. We don't have a result. We don't have a result of this type. So I'm very hesitant, because when you don't have a Gaussian noise distribution, when you don't have Gaussian noise, things can be tricky. So I'm hesitant of replying to this question in full generality. What I can tell you is that you can have a case where where the lowest point in terms of for f is not the most probable one, which goes so you have non-Lyapunov contributions there, but it's complicated. All right, how much time do I have?
5 minutes.
5 minutes, fine. All right. So in the just to define the energy, then what you do is, if you want to define the probability of transition between any 2 points, what you look at is the minimum value of the action between these 2 points. All right, and if instead of 2 points you take 2 critical components, then this is what gives you the transition cost from one critical component to another. All right, now this allows you to construct a very specific graph, which is the graphical representation of the Markov chain that I talked before. It is a complete weighted directed graph. The set of vertices is exactly the set of critical components of F. The edges, well, it is complete, and you weight each edge according to this, where is it? To this cost matrix. All right. And you end up with a graph like that. And finally, to answer your question, how do you define the energy here? If you want to define the energy for, let's say, this point, you need to check how much probability mass is ending up here in all possible ways. All right, so to be very clear, what you do is you look at all spanning trees in the graph that reach this point, okay? And then what you do is you define the energy to be the minimum of all these spanning trees, of all these spanning trees, okay? This is the definition of the energy, and thanks to this definition, this is the formal statement of the result that I told you before, that if you have if you are interested about getting delta close to your critical region, then you are spending all but an exponentially small amount of time near delta close to the critical set. The distribution of the various critical regions follows up to your tolerance level, the Boltzmann-Gibbs distribution, and where is this minimized? It is minimized exactly at the ground state, which is the this should write EI, not KI, which is the minimum of the energy. Not necessarily the minimum of the function. However, if it so happens that you have, oh, I don't have it written. Okay, too bad. If it so happens that the noise is Gaussian, this energy right here, where is it? This energy is just the value of your function at the critical region divided by the variance of the noise. All right, and I will finish with a simulation just to give you an idea.
So it's implied that if you take the noise Gaussian somehow,
Yeah.
same variance everywhere, it makes sense, no?
Yeah.
Because then it should be the minimum of the function.
Yes, in that case it will. But in
And is it a good thing to do in general to use this kind of noise?
you don't use it. Again, in deep learning, this is what's coming from the from your data distribution, from your mini batch sampling, etc. And what happens? You can, but then it depends what is the dominant noise component. All right, it is a very subtle question. What happens in certain deep learning models, and there is a discussion of this in the paper, but this is very hard to get into. Let me just show at least what happens. Let me close with this. What I'm showing is here random initializations of SGD. All right, and here is you see the density plot. Here you see the density plot in 3D. All right, and what I've plotted here, this wireframe, is the theoretical distribution of the invariant measure of SGD. And what happens is, come on, this. So you see that very quickly it goes. The distribution starts hugging the contours of F. This is with Gaussian noise, by the way. And you see, well, okay. You saw what you saw. Yeah, I don't know how to do it. Anyway. Okay, never mind. You get this very nice agreement between the empirical distribution and what is actually predicted. So I had some stuff for the heating time, for the global convergence time, but I will stop here before I tire you too much. Thank you.